So when you're selling a commodity, people do ask, what's the potency and what's the price? And that's usually the first question you get with cannabis beverages too. So if I'm going to hold up a 2 milligram drink and it costs $4 wholesale, then you're going to get immediate pushback from the retailer.
Hey guys, welcome to the Wine, Whiskey and Weed Show. This is your host, Sid Patel. I'm here with Paulo Sobral. He's one of the popular cannabis beverage consultant, and I'm sure Paulo can brief us on his journey in cannabis. Paulo, thanks for taking the time out here. Why don't you just give a little context to our audience on how you started in cannabis and what you're up to these days?
Yeah, for sure. So I started in cannabis in 2016 in the California market. It was still medical only back then. So I came to cannabis from PepsiCo, and I worked for PepsiCo for nearly 6 years in various different field sales roles. So I supervised the sales reps that would service Walmart, mass retail stores like that. So I've seen people's passion for beverage brands that they have an affinity towards. You drop a pallet of Mountain Dew in Southwest Virginia on the first of the month, and that pallet gets wiped out quickly. Suspected people took baths in it. So I had a CPG background. I know the strength of strong brands. And then I entered cannabis because I personally wasn't passionate about the products I was selling at PepsiCo. But at the same time, our retail partners didn't really care what my opinion was. They cared about what the customers walking in the door were going to buy. So I really wanted to sell something I could be more passionate about. And cannabis kind of became into my orbit in around 2014. It was always around me, but my friends did it growing up, but I abstained because I thought it was the gateway drug towards a lot of bad things. But around that time, I saw a documentary that it was positioned as a wellness supplement. Specifically, a father was treating his son with epilepsy with CBD oil. And he's on screen and he's crying and telling the story about how his son was taking 23 pills a day and he was weaned off all but 3. So that put me down a rabbit hole of research, found out the history of prohibition, the various benefits of cannabis. And then I got curious enough to try it on myself. And really what made me curious is learning the fact that you can never overdose on cannabis. So I said, what's the harm here? So I tried it by going to a dispensary, getting my medical card, going to a dispensary in Bakersfield. And this is all experience that was interesting on itself. But then I came home and made my own edible, researched online on how to make it, tried it out, kept dialing it back. And I just enjoyed it. It didn't have a lot of medical benefits to me, unless you count relaxation as a benefit.
Yeah.
But, people consume alcohol without it having any functional or medical benefits. So I thought there'd be more and more people like me that would educate themselves and then stigmas would get erased. So I also saw the long-term business CPG potential and the fact that everyone at Pepsi, well, not everybody, but a majority of them thought I was crazy for entering the cannabis industry, told me it was a risk. And the fact that it was a risk told me there was a high potential reward. So I entered the industry in 2016 as a brand rep for a vape company called Bloom Farms. And I basically just did that to learn the industry. And eventually it became the recreational market that it is today in 2018. I pivoted a couple of times. The most recent role I had was as the first salesperson at a company called Nanogen, which became Vertosa, which powers most of the beverages in the California market. They've expanded to other markets. But
in fact, I just had a chat with Ben yesterday.
Oh, right on. And we're going to see him at the Cannabis Beverage Expo on the 28th, assuming people are listening to this before then.
So great. I think I did not know that you worked for Vertosa.
Yeah, I did. And that's where I saw both the potential of the category, but all the real challenges that exist today.
Got it.
And then Vertosa just does one thing, right? Well, at the time they did just one thing and they did it really well and they wanted to keep their focus there. And we need that one thing, but there's also other challenges in the category that need to be solved, mainly distribution and then adaptation at cannabis retail because they are slow to pick up beverages. So I started consulting where I can assist in those two things, build out solutions and help brands in market with those specific solutions as well.
Got it. So let's go there, right? What kind of problems are you solving? When you say solutions for the brands, I believe can be shelf placement or stacks placement design, or getting a whole program for a dispensary at national level, or maybe at an independent level, right? So maybe just give us some examples of what goes on in everything from the product once it's out, like distribution.
Yeah, for sure. Really quickly, before it even gets made, it's hard just to find a reliable contract manufacturer that's willing to work with THC beverages. And that's because your traditional beverage co-packer does not have a license to process THC. So either they would have to open a separate facility, which is expensive for a small market, or they would either be consultants for somebody who opens a facility. And to date, most of the people who have open beverage facilities did not have an extensive beverage background. That is changing. We are getting more and more that will meet at the trade show itself. So it's hard just to get your beverage out there first. Now, a real story is my first client hired me in January of 2020, and they had a production run scheduled, but they still had yet to find a distributor in California that would be willing to take their drinks. And there's a lot of reasons for that. To distribute drinks, cannabis drinks, you have to have a THC license. And traditionally, these distributors are used to moving an ounce of flower that literally weighs an ounce and generates $80 of wholesale revenue. So that's how they're set up. And you talk about a case of drinks that weighs 50 pounds and is 30 times the size and does half the revenue of that 1 ounce of flower, and the sales still aren't there. That's a challenge. So this time last year, I struggled just to find distributors willing to carry beverage. So you couldn't even get your product delivered to a retailer by a licensed fulfillment partner without doing a lot of calls and selling the distributor first on the potential beverages, because they just haven't done it before and they haven't seen the vision. And then when you get to retail, a lot of retailers don't have loading docks. They're in parts of town where it's even hard to get parking. The van delivering itself isn't optimized for drinks, so it can't make frequent deliveries to that retailer. So they're delivering a lot of drinks at once. There's not space in the back room. And still, what's true today in California is a lot of people shopping to dispensaries ask two questions: what's the potency and what's the price? And then the retailer itself, they'll ask me like, why would somebody buy a low dose beverage when they can get a chocolate bar? Now, you're in the beverage industry, you know why they would. I know why they would. We can talk about why they are. But there's still just slow adaptation, both from the distributor and the retail level. And neither have built out the infrastructure to support drinks. And the sales still are only 1% to 2% of the category, overall cannabis category. So it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. The sales need to get there for them to build out the infrastructure, but the infrastructure needs to be built out for the sales to get there.
Yep, agree. I think it's just a matter of some federal bottlenecks which are there as well. And then once a big brand sort of comes in, they can really help as well, sometimes with their push of awareness, and sort of the reverse depletion where they create a demand and then finally, consumers walking in with asking that, do you carry this beverage? Back on, I agree 100%, on the distribution. I'm trying to understand that is like alcohol, are the distributors really just buying and then it's their job to open more dispensaries like a traditional distributor, or then you're just using them as a fulfiller where they just get a cut and you still do the sales at dispensary level?
Great question. So it really depends on the distributor and how they've set up their team and their operation. So the biggest distributor in California, I believe, is Nabis. And they will tell you right now that they count on the brands to do sales for you. So they strictly view themselves as a logistics partner. And there's strength in that. If you can just count on your product getting from point A to point B and the distributor to collect payment for you, that takes away a lot of headaches for the brand, so the brand can focus on sales and marketing. There are some third-party distribution companies and third-party sales agencies within California that will tell you they'll help you get into doors. But just from my different experiences with them is they all try really hard, but they're never going to sell. And this is probably true of alcohol too. They're never going to sell your product the way you can sell your product. So I would just look at them as supplemental support. So really their strength is they already do have a relationship with the retailer. So I used to work at Pepsi and we were a distributor and we did carry third-party brands. And the third-party brands saw the value in Pepsi as a distribution company because we had retail relationships and retail clout. So we can introduce you to Mr. Retailer, and that way it'd be a joint sales effort where I introduce you to the retailer and you as the brand rep can really talk about the product. And then I can make sure whatever is discussed in that meeting, me being the distributor, gets executed on because I'm in that store once a week or twice a week or whatever the cadence is.
Nice. What's a good sales call to you? You know, like if you had to give a training to a sales rep, you know, including a practical introduction. Hey, you know, I'm looking for a bud tender or I'm looking for a decision maker. Give me a real spiel, you know, on what goes on and how you would coach someone.
Yeah. So there's cannabis beverages are considered a niche product. A lot of cannabis sales reps today are used to selling commodities, and I don't mean that with any negative connotation. But
yeah, it's like how craft beer you had to introduce, right?
Right. So when you're selling a commodity, people do ask, what's the potency and what's the price? And that's usually the first question you get with cannabis beverages too. So if I'm going to hold up a 2 milligram drink and it costs $4 wholesale, then you're going to get immediate pushback from the retailer. So I like to ask them questions that get them out of the thought process of cannabis. Because to me, a cannabis beverage is just a beverage with cannabis in it. We are forced to sell them into these channels because of regulations. So how do we make the best of it and start to get that retailer to have the same frame of mind that I do? I say, hey, Mr. Retailer, so this beverage right here, this is CBD, but this is considered like a rum and Coke. So when would you drink a rum and Coke? Let's say it's before you have a dinner or you're going to listen to jazz music. So I would ask them a question like, hey, do you ever go out to concerts? And they say, yes. What do you typically drink when you're there? And whatever their answer is, then that gets them in the frame of mind of thinking about beverages. So if I'm selling a beverage that's meant to be drank at the beach and I ask them what they drink when they're at the beach, and whatever beverage they tell me has a similar flavor profile to the cannabis beverage I'm selling, then they're really starting to see who we're trying to target with that beverage. We're not trying to talk somebody out of smoking or dabbing because they're still going to do that anyways. But every single person drinks liquid. Not everybody is going to smoke or dab. So if you are going to go to the beach, it's illegal to drink alcohol there, but now a low dose cannabis beverage might be more appealing. And that's exactly who we're trying to sell it to, is the consumer who is looking for a cannabis occasion in places where it's not socially acceptable to smoke. Or if you're at a party, you don't want to eat a gummy bear and then walk around with empty hands for 2 hours, right? You got to have that shield between you and the other party guests to give you some confidence, I guess.
True. What are the objections that you've seen? You know, any 3 or 4 that comes to mind? Obviously, one is like, hey, we don't do much of beverages, right? That's the most common one I would expect. You know, the category is still new. But what are some other things like, I don't have space, you know, I don't have money, you know, our budgets are done for the month. So just give us some 3 or 4 and then give us an answers on how you, handle them.
Well, first of all, in California specifically, the retail industry is struggling a lot. So what we're seeing is a lot of retailers are starting to consolidate. So
meaning
we're seeing
the sales are slow. Is that why they're struggling? Like consumers are not buying?
So they do have real competition from the unlicensed market. So depending
illegal market, is it?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And like in LA, you literally don't know what's legal and illegal just from walking around on the street, and they might be side by side with each other. It's a real mess. So that's putting a constraint on the top line revenue of a retailer. But when you get to the bottom line, they're taxed each and every way. They have frequent employee turnover. And I'm not going to name who it is, but I was talking to a major retailer in California, actually talking to one of their investors, and they restricted their buyers from doing any buying for a period of 5 to 6 weeks because for whatever reason, the store was running out of stock of products that dispensary owned and were in distribution. So there's a lot of challenges in running cannabis retail. I'm saying all that to say that if you're a brand and you're going into a retailer that's on the verge of insolvency or the manager just quit 3 days ago, it's going to be tough to sell on your product no matter what.
In fact, you should not. Yeah,
exactly. So in that scenario, I say it's probably not honestly a good use of your resources, meaning your time and money. So, but I have a good list of 20 to 50 retailers that already get beverage and are selling beverage. So those are the ones I target, especially if you're a nascent brand or your budget is limited. So you want to work with somebody who already knows who those retailers are, or you just do your own homework. And the way you do your homework is, does the dispensary have a cooler already on the showroom floor? Yes. Is there a lot of drinks in there, meaning a lot of variety of drinks, not just 2 or 3 types of drinks? Because as you know, Sid, you go into a convenience store, there's like 300, 400 SKUs in a tiny room, right?
Yeah.
So make sure the retail already gets beverage. I don't invest my time in talking retailers into beverage that don't see it and don't see the beverage consumer. Not because I'm not passionate about it, but only because I'm one person. So common objection you get is space. So if it's space, unfortunately, you're probably going to have to displace a beverage in the cooler already. So just ask them how all the beverages are performing, and you're likely to find one that the retailer says is a slow mover and they're not getting support from the brand. So that is your opportunity to come in and give them support, and support is going to be a unique question delivered by the retailer. The other common one you'll get is there's a lot of retailers in California that have been around 10, 20 years. So they started as a medical only facility. So they're used to people going in there that have real medical needs for cannabis. So I'm saying that all to say it's a very heavy user walking in there. So usually when I talk to those retailers, they'll tell me their customers are only interested in high potency products at low prices. But you look around, I'm going to see a 0 milligram drink somewhere in that store. Or I'll ask the person who's the buyer themselves, like, what type of drinks do you drink? And if they drink kombucha, they're probably paying anywhere from $4 to $6 for a kombucha that has 0 milligrams of THC in there. And why am I asking that? It's to start again the frame of mind that these are beverages first and foremost with cannabis in it. So it's either space or they think sales are going to be slow. And it's up to you to give them a lot of support to make sure that the sales are going to be where you expect them to be. And if you're new, you don't have data to back that up. So it's going to be a lot of you personally sitting into the retail establishment and talking to their consumers to make sure you're getting feedback and that the product is moving, especially when you get initial placement.
What sort of assurance are you giving retailers that it's going to move, right? Like in wine store, I can say that, hey, I'll come Friday and Saturday and do the store tastings and make sure, I'll help you with some depletions. In what ways can you give sort of an assurance to a dispensary, on depletion, if there are any?
Yeah, so it depends on the dispensary and the local municipality. But in like Palm Springs, for example, we can make cannabis cocktails on site in a lot of dispensaries there. And for brands I've represented, we've had a lot of success with us sending. I have some people that have converted to selling cannabis drinks from the traditional alcohol industry that are premium mixologists. So if I send somebody there and they're making cannabis cocktails, nobody goes up to them and says, what's the potency in this? They just want to enjoy a cocktail because nobody asks what the ABV is in a cocktail, right?
Yeah.
So if we can make cocktails on site, then I can sell a product all day. Now, if you walk into a dispensary and it's set up like an Apple store where everything is behind jewelry cases, you can't touch the merchandise, they don't have a cooler on the floor, and the product just lives on the iPad as a digital image, then honestly, the only way I am going to get sales is probably through heavy promotions and discounting. So if you give them the dispensary that assurance, then they can do co-promotion on social media or however they currently market their specials. So the 2 easiest ways is for you to make cocktails on site, which is my favorite way to do it, or heavy discounting and promotions.
Got it. And when a dispensary says, "Hey, Paulo, your product's not moving; it's a slow mover," how do you sort of analyze that? And I guess you would be doing the same thing, right? Like, hey, dispensary, can I just get into some promotion and get it going for you? But are there cases where retailers say, and then are payments related to that performance, or if there are terms like in alcohol where 30 days they have to pay you, or it's just like purely your term, my term, and let's see how the booze goes?
Yeah. So a lot of times if you're a new product, they'll pretty much demand terms. I've seen them ask for as many as 90-day terms. And right now it's the reality that retailers in California specifically, well, all over, because we are limiting the number of licenses we give out, they hold a lot of power. So basically, if you're a new brand and they ask for terms, do you want to get into the store? You have to meet the terms. So I've given guarantees in the past where after 90 days, if the product still isn't moved, I'll just buy back the inventory myself. And then when you as the brand buy back the inventory, you can always use that for sampling. So it's kind of a no-lose proposition if you are able to do something like that.
Got it. Let's go on the sales rep side, Paulo. What are your tips for hiring a good sales rep for cannabis? For example, I don't know whether cannabis knowledge is required or a good thing when you go out and sell. So maybe that tells me that are bud tenders good for hiring a sales reps and so on. What's your take on based on your experience, what kind of characteristics you've seen that doing good?
Yeah, so for anybody in the industry, they need a ton of resilience, and they have to have an authentic reason as to why they're passionate about cannabis. Just I want to make money isn't good enough for this industry. So
so normally you would say a user is a good idea. Like if they're personally a user, it's a good idea too. I guess.
Yeah, I definitely think you have to be a user of cannabis to be a successful cannabis sales rep today. But it's when we're talking about beverages, it's a lot different sale than selling flower or concentrates, traditional products. So sales reps in cannabis that have never sold anything else before, they lean a lot on their experience, their network, and their relationships. But now if you're having to sell a non-believer on beverages, they're just not going to take a chance just because you're friends with them. So if it's cannabis beverages, I would look for somebody, honestly, like myself, who has sold at CPG. They are determined and resilient. They do want to make a name for themselves in the cannabis industry. But you can't just come in guns a-blazing talking about why your product's the best and the retailer doesn't know what they're talking about. So you do have to ask a lot of questions, because every retailer is different in cannabis too. So it's just a traditional sales process at that point, but you just can't be ultra aggressive as you would be in a traditional CPG startup, let's say.
And the dispensaries are mostly, are they owned really by head office, or it's like still mom and pop is there? What that means is, can you just go as cold calling and just, hey, I'm looking for a buyer, or who makes a decision here? Is that still, because I'm assuming that means still a lot of owners are operating the dispensaries?
It depends. The biggest chain in California, well, it's probably Cookies, but Cookies itself has multiple franchise owners under the Cookies name. The biggest one that does consolidated buying, I believe, is Stizzy, which has about 13 stores. And then within California, you have about 800 stores. So it is still very fragmented. It really depends on the region you're calling on. But you can do a lot of cold calling. It was easier to cold call when I joined the industry 6 years ago than it is today. Now there is a lot of gatekeeping.
What's the question do you ask when you enter, if you're looking to chat and make an appointment?
Yeah. So that's the first question is, what's your buying process? And typically they will say you have to make an appointment. A lot of times they'll give you an email to send information to that will probably go unanswered. So once I like to physically show up, I'm a people person. So even if I don't talk to the decision maker there, it's still an opportunity for me to be a detective. So I look around the store. Are they already selling drinks? That's what I want to answer when I'm in the store, meaning answer to myself. And then if you see something odd in the store, like THC sex lube, THC hot sauce, THC marshmallows, THC pop rocks, I would ask a bud tender, anyone I can talk to that works there, about the product, because at least tells you the dispensary is open to, let's say, niche products, right? And then you can ask them how that product got in there. And maybe they'll say they own the product, then that doesn't really help you much, but you kind of will learn a little bit there. But if they tell you about the process to get the product into the store, then you're starting to hear the thought process of how to get a product like cannabis beverages into that retailer. So eventually you will find out who the right person is to talk to. And if you've done enough homework and detective work, you will get through to them, but be prepared to get 7-8 no's or 7-8 no replies before you finally get your product in the door.
Super, Paulo. So just one last question here. What is a good sales deck, right? So sales presentation, like in our wine, let's say, if sales rep normally carries a wine bag where 6 samples are there, and there is a brand deck when they're pitching, which shows them case cards, shelf talkers, like actual merchandising and so on. And then there's a price page. What kind of things are there when a cannabis presentation is made? What do you recommend is the best?
Yeah, so more and more I'm seeing people go digital in this industry, and it's probably true of other industries. So I just like to make a quick 1-page PDF that has all your different SKUs on there. and just 3 or 4 bullet points at most, but most of the real estate should be an image on the PDF. Most of the real estate should be an image on the PDF that just kind of tells the whole brand ethos in one image, which is easier said than done, right? But what's cool is you can make virgin product with no cannabis in it and just hand those out for people for flavor. So if you have the budget for it, ideally you leave a case of those in the break room for the bud tenders and retailer buyers to enjoy. Because believe it or not, like I said, everyone drinks liquid. So if they like your drink just for the flavor of it, then it's a lot easier to sell in the real product once you follow back up and ask them how the virgin products work.
That's a good one. Anything else you have, Paulo, here? For any tips, any closing remarks?
Yeah. So my greatest hope is that a story I like to think about is CVS pharmacy, right? And I forgot who told me this, but CVS initially opened up as just a pharmacy where you get to get medicine, just like cannabis retail opened up as a place where you get alternative medicine. But the good thing about drinks is everybody drinks and you never know when the urge hits them to get drinks. And working at Pepsi, I put vending machines in dentist office, oil change locations, hair salons, you name it, because again, every place with the real estate for it is a potential place to sell drinks. So now you go into CVS and there's a whole wall of drinks there. And they sell more units of drinks than they probably do pills at the back, which is what they were known for initially. But they invested in the infrastructure for drinks because they saw the revenue potential there. So again, going back to what I've probably said multiple times here, the infrastructure doesn't exist today to support the drinks category. We need more and more distributors that are optimizing their operations with beverages in mind. And then we need more retailers that are thinking about coolers and backroom storage. And again, if the distributor is able to service that retailer more frequently, then the backroom storage isn't going to be as much of an issue. But at the end of the day, I do think cannabis beverages is going to be the largest category in cannabis in terms of units consumed. But that's going to take federal legalization, like you touched on earlier. But in between now and then, anyone that wants to collaborate on solutions or does want to start a brand of their own, be happy to connect and share the valuable insights and lessons I've learned through my time here. And grateful for collaborations with people like yourself, Sid, that are lending your expertise in traditional alcohol to this nascent category.
Appreciate it, man. Where can we find you? Just any website, Instagram handle, just throw out some places.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really active on LinkedIn. Just search for my name. You'll find me there. I use the hashtag drink cannabis a lot, which you'll probably find out on Instagram, but Instagram's mainly my journey with my family and is what I use it for the most. I do have my website, drinkcannabis.club, which hasn't been updated as much as I want just because consulting has been a boom. But no, I'm mainly looking forward to connecting with people at the Cannabis Beverage Expo. So hopefully they hear this before then, but if not, see you next year.